Hello, everybody, and welcome to a fresh, brand new episode on a subject that we've been dealing with for already a number of video messages. And that's because of the interest and because of the request to discuss further this unfortunate or very much part of life situation, and that is stress, anxiety, depression, unhappiness that people are experiencing. What is the perspective of Torah? What is the perspective, the advice that Hasidus offers us to deal with these issues? These issues are not very helpful in our lives if they are exaggerated. And that's a very important point, if they are exaggerated. Because to a certain degree, stress is helpful. But before we get into today's discussion, let me remind everybody that my name is Rabbi Shlomo Ezagui, and I'm a rabbi here in South Florida for the last 36 years. I've been around the block, and I've come across a lot of life experiences, personally, individually, and with the people that I deal with. I've authored a book on Maimonides, which includes all 14 great volumes of his magnum opus, Mishnah Torah. And I have already authored a book on spirituality, over 800 pages, 300 chapters. I'm now trying, for the longest time, to put together a book on physics of the mystics that discusses the parallels and relationship between science, quantum physics, and Kabbalah and Hasidus. So I got a little bit of some interesting and deep background, and we're going to talk today on the subject of stress, anxiety, depression, unhappiness, positivity, joy, and happiness, and the sun shining as it is right in the picture behind me. So let me make a short review of what we talked about in the last episode, and then we're going to expand and talk a little further on some new considerations, tools, and techniques, and understanding of these conditions that people need to deal with in order to move along with a upright and with a strong kind of disposition. So the last time we talked about stress, and we talked about the pressures that come from the outside, and like in the case of a boat where there's water all around the boat, the way the boat actually is able to journey from one destination to the other is only because of the water that it's able to float onto. This is the way the boat was designed, and the only way the boat moves is if it's able to float over water. The problem is if the water comes into the boat. So pressures are important. You know, they're important. And let me remind everybody that what I'm discussing with you is from the Torah. It's from the 5 books of Moses, from the Talmud. And so when the Torah compares the hardships that a person has to Maim Rabbim, to great torrents of water, so, you know, this is precisely what it is. It's a energy. It's an energy that could be used either in a positive way or in a negative way, depending on how we address and how we respond to it. And that's really what pressure in life is all about. And those pressures that we have in life, we can deal with it in many different ways, and they're all important. So let me remind you again, the first thing is that having water, having stress is important, because when you have stress, when you have that kind of pressure, it's pushing the best out of you. The only way to get the best out of you, you know, the Talmud talks about the Jewish people being compared to olive oil and olives, and the best way you get out of the oil, the best way you get the oil out is by crushing the olive. So, you know, we got the oil inside of ourselves. We got that very special substance that's helpful to ignite and make light, but there needs to be sometimes the pressure. But if the pressure is too overwhelming, then we forget about the oil and we become totally crushed. We don't even get a chance to recognize that there was any oil that came out in the process, and we're too stuck inside the pain and the pressure of the crushing that we just went through. So what we talked about is the first thing that we need to catch the stress before it gets out of hand. And we need to recognize the triggers that bring on us the different degrees of stress, whether it's the people that we are around. Some people can trigger some bad kind of stress and pressure, whether it's the place, whether it's the situation we're in. So it's very, very important to recognize that if we can avoid those people, if we can avoid those places, if we can avoid those situations, then that's what we have to do. And sometimes we just inadvertently bump into certain people or need to be in certain places, and we need to be in certain situations. Then we need to think about our thoughts. How do we respond to those people, to those places, to those situations? Your response is very, very important. The way you interpret, the way you attach meaning, the way you frame those situations are very, very important to stop the stress before it could start to snowball into an uncontrollable kind of a situation. So these were some of the things we talked about in the past episode of dealing with stress and dealing with anxiety, which could lead into way worse emotional situations. And that's the idea. The idea is that if we are aware mentally of those triggers, so then through our thinking, we can take control or avoid the emotional the emotional results that come out of bad thinking. Let me explain to you something. The way the mind works, and I talk more about this in my Physics of the Mystics podcast when I'm discussing more issues of science. But the way the brain works is that, we have a reptilian kind of a mind, part of the brain. Then we have the limbic system part of the brain. And then we have the neocortex, the cerebral part of the brain. And they work like a ladder. So you have the reptilian level, and then you have the limbic system, and then you have the cortex, which is above that. And actually, it's pretty interesting how these represent the different levels of the soul. The soul expresses inside our body on different levels. It's all there, but it's a matter of what we connect and what we are conscientious of. There's the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama. The nefesh is more connected to just plain being alive, similar to the reptilian, the most basic level of our brain. Then we have the ruach, which is a higher dimension of our souls, and that's more related to our emotions. And then we have the neshama, which is a deeper and a higher level of the experience we have of our consciousness, and that deals more with the intellect and the logic that we experience in our lives. And they're all related to each other. So when you have a certain healthy way of thinking, so then it will influence the way you feel in your emotions. And then it will trickle its way down in the way you behave. But as the Tzemach Tzedek, the great teachers of Chabad, tell us, the way you act on the outside will also have a backwards effect inside ourselves. So if you behave in a certain way, even if it's empty of any particular emotion or particular kind of intellectual influence and motivation, but just the way you behave, the way you dress will have an impact backwards on your emotions. The way you act emotionally, you clap your hands and you act happy, says the Tzemach Tzedek. So then it will actually help broaden the way you think. So this is very important in dealing with stress and pressures in our life, and that is being aware of our thoughts, being aware of our emotions, being aware of the way we behave. because the way we behave, this will have an impact on our emotions. It's like a chicken and an egg situation, and they're both related. The chicken lays the egg, and the egg is an expression of the chicken. And they are connected to each other. So you can either catch the chicken and assure yourself of a better egg, or when you see what kind of an egg you have, you can, in the future at least, try to decide on a better chicken. So it's very, very important where your mind is in dealing with stress. So we talked about the idea of staying focused on the moment. Very, very important to stay focused on the moment. And the way you stay focused on the moment, because a lot of anxiety is brought about by this distorted thinking of all the different ideas of the evil inclination that try to bring us down, and all the possibilities of negativity in the future, and that will, for the most part, never materialize. And so we talked about the importance of staying focused on the moment, because that's all you have. When you pray, try very hard to understand what you're saying. And when you are focused on the moment, on the strength of what you are verbalizing, this is going to give you a reprieve, and it's also going to build up strength to be able to deal with the pressures and with the torrents of water that we deal with in our lives. So we talked about that it's important to change your attitude. It's important to change the way you interpret events. We talked about Nachum Ish Gamzu and Rabbi Akiva, his student, that the way they dealt with situations was that everything that happens, they said that this is for the good. They understood that nothing can happen without the influence of God. Everything is God. There's no place empty and void of God. And God created the world in kindness. That means the essence and source of this world, it was born out of kindness. It was born out of love. And that's really the essential identity of the world. And that's the essential identity of God himself, who manifests the 13 attributes of mercy. So therefore, everything that happens is always infused with mercy, with rachamim, with compassion, and with kindness. And if you view things that you are going through in this world that are not happening to you, but they're happening for you, they're not coming to push you down, but they're coming considering the circumstance and the situation that you're in to build you up, that change in mentality will make a whole different reality in your life. So these are some of the things and some of the added notes that we already talked about in the past. Today, I want to talk about and add to this a couple of other aspects. And the other couple of aspects that I want to add to this is that one of the very, very important ideas to remind ourselves is that, some people, they get stressed out of being stressed. And then it becomes a self-feeding kind of a situation. I shouldn't be stressed over this. Number one, that's already a thought distortion. What do you mean you shouldn't be stressed over this? If there are pressures in this world, then you have to just deal with the reality the way it is. And you have to realize that it's for the good. And you have to strengthen your trust in God. And by strengthening your trust in God and understanding that it is He that is doing this for you, then you are accepting and riding the wave rather than trying to fight against the current. Here in Florida, they tell you that if, God forbid, you're in the water and all of a sudden you feel a riptide, don't fight against it. The way to get out of that situation is to just float along until finally you get thrown out of that tide. The Rebbe mentioned this many different times. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, he says many different times, when we're put through a hardship, when we're put through a difficulty, the difficulty is there for our good. And the minute that we accept this truth, and the minute we start focusing, and that's a very important thing, because, what you focus on becomes your reality. The way you see things, this is the way you mold the event to be for you. This is what you connect to in the event that you are experiencing. And so the Rebbe repeated this many different times in many different letters and communications with people, that the faster you realize that what you're going through is for your good and that it's in good hands, then it will actually diminish the hardship and the difficulty and the pressures that you are going through at this time. And that's very, very important to remember. Another technique or another aspect that can help when a person is going through hardships and difficulty, and that is listening to music. When a person wants to be a prophet, so the Rambam says it's very important that he has the quality of simcha, of happiness, and of joy. And that's another discussion, is happiness and pleasure equal to each other? It's absolutely not. Pleasure is something on the surface that you give yourself on the outside. Happiness is something that you develop internally. And if a person has happiness inside himself, he doesn't have to seek pleasurable experiences. He doesn't have to become addicted to pleasurable outside kind of influences that could end up being very unhealthy and very not good, whether it's eating too much, drinking too much, doing drugs and different other things that people turn to relieve themselves of stress and pleasure. That's because they're dealing with this in the improper kind of a way, trying to address what they feel as being a pressure by soothing it on the outside. And that's called giving yourself pleasure. But happiness is something that comes on the inside. It has to be developed. And ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't come easy. It's not a quick fix. These are things that you have to work on every single day. And these are things that sometimes we fail at it, but we got to pick ourselves up and we got to notice where we failed so that the next time we learn from the past experience to become bigger and stronger the next time we come across that experience. And really, that's the way to be able to deal with things in a much kind of a better way. And that is when we develop the happiness within ourselves. And like I said, this is for another occasion. How do we go about developing the happiness? Now we're dealing with stress and pressure. And to relieve the stress and pressure, many different times what could help draw out a bit of peace and tranquility within ourselves is music. Music has the very, very special quality in it to be able to draw some very godly parts within our soul. And that is why it is one of the ingredients, one of the factors that bring about prophecy. A prophet obviously has to be open for receiving godliness. When a person is depressed, when a person is, as we say in Yiddish, when he is zerquetscht, when he is narrow and he's compressed, so then he's really not a wide and a broad vessel to receive the infinite greatness of God. In order to be able to receive the infinite greatness of blessings, you have to be able to expand. The way you expand is through joy and through happiness. Stress and pressure puts exactly as the word is describing, pressure and stress to crush and to make us, if you only look at the crushing part of it, to make us smaller, to be able to, it takes us into a ball, into ourselves. And then it ends up becoming even worse, which we don't want to talk about right now, because it's depressing even just to think about those ideas. The real attitude that Hasidus takes to all these different things is to turn our mindset towards positivity, towards the goodness of God and the goodness that is in the world and the goodness that is in life. Obviously, we are going to be tested. By its very definition, Abraham went through 10 tests. All the greatest of the great, Jacob went through his tests. Everybody goes through their own set of tests. That is the way we become stronger. That is the way we bring the best that is inside ourselves out to the surface. That is the way we prove ourselves to God, that we are worthy of what really we deserve and what God wants to give us. But we can't get it without paying the price. And the way we get all these different things is by staying focused on the goal, by having hope. And that's a very, very important element in dealing with stress and pressure. When we are in these difficult situations, many different times, we all of a sudden, we fall, it's like falling to the floor, and the only thing you can see is the ground underneath you. We start forgetting we're on a journey. We start forgetting that there is a destination we need to reach. We start forgetting the excitement of reaching that destination. And that's a very, very important kind of awareness to remember. And that is that we need to be able to always keep the hope of the goals we have in mind. And for that, you have to have goals. And for that, you have to have aspirations. And that's very important, that if a person has aspirations and he has goals, and as a Jew, we always have aspirations and goals, because our aspirations and goals is to be able to do another mitzvah. It's to be able to do the commandments and the responsibilities that we have as a Jew, to be able to make the world a better place and to improve our own lives. That in itself. So these are very, very important added elements to what we've discussed in the past. And that is that a person needs to lighten up. How does he lighten up? How does he develop simcha? How does he develop a broader vessel so that he doesn't become all of a sudden all narrowed up and crushed? And that's by listening to music. And that's by developing a reminder of the goals and the dreams that he should never give up on reaching, because every single day that a person wakes up is a message from God, that God is giving the person that I have faith in you. God is telling you, and I'm not coming with a burden that you are not able to accomplish. And we are partners with God. Every single day we are partners with God to accomplish the great purpose in God Almighty creating the entire universe. God cannot accomplish what he needs to accomplish without our input. He designed it in such a way that he created the world. And in the 7 days, in the 6 days of creation, God said, I made the world in such a way that I leave a little area that I want you to go and contribute and partner with me in fulfilling the reason why I made this universe. That's the way God decided that it should be. So after God decided that it should be that way, when we do a mitzvah, and there's nobody that can replace and can duplicate what we're doing. The Talmud says that there are no two faces alike. There are no two ways of thinking alike. There are no two DNAs that are alike. There are no two thumbprints that are alike. Everybody has got their individual task. The aspects of our fathers tell us nothing that God created is created in vain. Everything has its own individual purpose. So these are the ideas that we need to remind ourselves when we're going through stress and pressure. We need to remember that we are a partner with God, that we have a great mission to accomplish, that if we fell for a moment, this is precisely the opportunity to lift ourselves up and to draw the strength that we have within ourselves and bring it out and discover it and fish it out so that we can accomplish the success that this situation has been brought upon us. So I hope these are some ideas that can help give you strength and can give you hope to be able to deal with the hardships and the difficulties that we have in life that are sometimes we think overwhelming, but they're not overwhelming. And you'll listen back to what we talked about, trying to stop it before it happens And then maybe in the following, if I get enough feedback that requests that I should do so, maybe I'll discuss in the next videos what happens if a person already is down in the ground and he's deep into the dark cave. So how do you get out of there? Since we were talking about trying to nip it in the bud and stop it before it goes out of hand, and trying to be aware of our thought patterns and reframe the way we are interpreting and viewing the situation. And we are talking about the ideas which appear to be not that deep down into the hole. So maybe in the coming weeks, we'll talk about what does Hasidus and what is the Talmud, and how does the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, advise us to deal when, unfortunately, we've not done all this, or we don't feel that it's strong enough to be able to address these situations. All the very best of good luck and of happiness and of joy and of staying focused on the light and on the positivity and always on the strength and the good reason why God is putting everybody through whatever you're going through.